You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host, Mike Jeffries. SKYLIT Books is an independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. We're open every day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we also offer online shopping and curbside pickup through our website, skylitbooks.com. And you can check out all our upcoming events on our Crowdcast page, crowdcast.io/skylitbooks. It's my pleasure to welcome Michelle Sugihara and Suchin onto the podcast today to talk about my life growing up Asian in America, an anthology of nonfiction that's out now from Simon & Schuster. How are you two doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
Yeah, so excited because today is the official day our book is out. I know while folks are listening to this, it'll be a little bit of a different day, but it's very exciting to wake up to this day.
They'll be able to appreciate the pub day enthusiasm a couple
Yes, pub day.
Yes,
pub day. It's my first pub day
Pub
ever.
day.
That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for.
That's the lingo. Michelle Sugihara is the executive director of CAPE, Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, a nonprofit professional organization that supports emerging and established Asian and Pacific Islander creatives in Hollywood through fellowships, consulting, and partnerships with production companies and studios. She's an entertainment attorney, film producer, and adjunct professor for the Claremont College's Department of Asian American Studies. Suchin is a veteran journalist who has been hosting and reporting the news for over 25 years. She has reported on ABC, NBC, Discovery Networks, Oxygen, and E! She is most known for her long tenure as the first Asian American reporter for MTV News. And she currently co-hosts a podcast, Add to Cart, about consumerism and what it says about who we are. All right, so Suchin, you got a portion of your introduction to this anthology to read for us?
Yes. Okay, I will read some of this. And so I wrote the introduction to this book we're talking about today, My Life Growing Up Asian in America. So here goes. There is a Korean word Han that is so essential to our identity, it is literally in the root word for Korea. Like a lot of very culturally specific words, the definition is hard to pin down, but it is, in essence, an emotional state of being that is somewhere between deep sorrow, resentment, and anger. Many Koreans equate this emotional state to a fire that sometimes rages and sometimes quietly smolders. This internalized energy can be destructive, but at times, it is from this fire that we can find the seeds of our courage. Han captures the complicated quality of where I am today in my understanding of courage, better so than the American idea, which is always the fighter, the first one into battle, or the leader of the protest. I find that version of courage to be limiting and self-defeating. By that definition, I am a coward, which I know is not true. As I write this introduction during the summer of 2021, courage has been on my mind a lot because I've been so afraid. The rise in anti-Asian hate crimes that began in 2020 has made me scared for the safety of my parents and of my kids. I keep going back to the images and videos of our elders and our women, especially who've been spit on, beaten, and threatened because they are considered foreign menaces. And yet in all the years I've been in the media, I have never seen such a public outpouring of our courage. I've never seen people share the stories of our isolation and fear in such a vocal way. And it moved me to share my own pain, something that I never imagined doing. And in this outpouring, so many of us, myself included, have found a way into courage that is as complex as our sense of who we are as Asian Americans today. So that's kind of the beginning of the introduction. I'm not going to read too much more, but yeah, I wanted to write about a different version of courage, something that didn't look like the fierce woman going into battle all the time. That it could also look like something much more vulnerable.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thanks for reading. And then, can you two just talk a little bit about how this anthology came together, sort of what the impetus was and how you found the writers?
Yeah, Michelle, I feel like you are the best person to answer this, and on how, number one, all of these voices came together. And then just the process of editing, right? Because I'm sure you have access to so many API voices at Cape, but you pick these for a reason. So can you talk about that process?
Yeah, I'm very excited to do so. This all started in the midst of COVID-19 lockdown. It was April 2021. We had just crossed the 1 year mark of the COVID imposed lockdown. The the violence against Asian were surging. And as with most things in our lockdown lives, it started with an email, this time from our friends over at MTV. Christian Trimmer reached out, and he had said he had taken the helm of MTV Books and wanted to create a book that was something that he wished that he had had when he was younger. And that was the idea, and we fell in love with it. We fell in love with Christian. Shout out to Cape's communication manager, Jess Vu, who really was a project manager on the Cape side for this book. And we started, as most things start, with a spreadsheet of who are potential people that we could reach out to, and who
The revolution on a spreadsheet.
It is.
I love it.
It all starts with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we said, hey, I wonder if we could get Suchin to do the intro. That would be amazing. And we knew that she had this long history with MTV, and we're friends through Time's Up and other community activities, and of course just loved her generally. And so she was, of course, the first pick and the first name thrown out. And so really, really happy that Sue, you agreed to do this, because it's been such a fun ride.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect too was we really wanted to have the other aspect is that we wanted to showcase the diversity of our communities. I mean, there's so much that's under the umbrella of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and just really the diversity and depth of the various communities. And so we wanted to also look just beyond the ethnic identities, but we looked at different ages, where people grew up across the country, different types of experiences. And so wanted to try to be as inclusive as possible of the various intersectionalities in our communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when it is a bit of a leap of faith, right? When you're getting all of these voices together, because you don't have everything before, you've signed on, you know what I mean, to do something. So it was incredible to see just the variety of voices. And I even want to add, for me, I feel like not only did you guys do a good job of representing so many in the Asian American community, and a lot of folks in the Asian American community that are even marginalized within our community. There's this fantastic essay in the book called On Being Black and Asian in America by Kimiko Matsuda Lawrence. It was also excerpted and featured on time.com about the sort of complicated intersection, right, between being Black and Asian in America. And I think that it was stories like this and, stories from so many others who live in this sort of crossroads, right, of like, even within Asian American identity, there's like the typical version of what we should look like, right? And that's very different than what a lot of Asian Americans experience, especially in this country, whether you're from, your parents are from different, cultures, whether you identify, in different ways. So I think that too was a really great thing that you guys included, because it's something that I feel like we're just scratching the surface and talking about, even within the Asian American community.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, even we tried to get a diversity of professions as well. I mean, there was a focus on the entertainment industry because that is our background, but also wanted to cast the net a little bit wider as well. And so to include poets and executives, television writers, and just across the gamut, and really to highlight that everybody has a story, you know. And it was just, I don't know what it was like for you reading this, Sue, but like for me it was so raw and emotional. Like I mean, I couldn't read it all in one sitting.
No, I couldn't. It's like one of those things. I kept emailing Christian as they were coming in, and I was taking so long to respond. And at one point I just emailed and I was like, I can't get through this in one sitting. I have to walk away. I have to take breathers and cry and then, rage. And then I can come back and sit in this chair and get through this damn book. But yeah, like it really is, I keep telling people, friends are like, what is this book you're working on? I was like, I know of course it's edited, it's a book, but it is it feels unedited. Like you said, Michelle, it feels really raw. It feels very like off the cuff. It feels like journal entries. It feels like intimate, like moments in time and people's memories, where people start their stories. Often it's like in the middle of a childhood memory that like you and I have no reference to, and yet these intimate moments that people are sharing are so universal. And so it's unlike I don't know. I don't want to say I've read every single piece of, every anthology of Asian American identity, but I think it is particularly born out of this time. And so there is a quality to it, a defiance to it, a vulnerability to it that I think that we've been able to access because of the pandemic, because of, the racial unrest, because of the violence that we've seen in the past few years that I feel like wouldn't have shown up in any other time. It is a capsule in some ways, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I love that you said journal entries, because as I was reading it, sometimes I felt like I was peeking in on people's diaries, and it made me feel a little uncomfortable at times. Like, wow, this is really emotional and vulnerable. And so I'm just really, really grateful to all of the contributors for just being so open and willing to share and letting us include these stories in the book. And yeah, I think this is really, it is a snapshot in time, and also it's a benchmark against hopefully what future generations can measure the progress in our community. I have hope for the future that hopefully some of these stories will maybe be more of a history than current. I don't know.
Yeah, that some of the themes in here and the things that people talk about will be continued, in the conversation, right? Like this isn't just like something that happened. Wasn't that a weird 2021, like remember that weird time when we all had to wear masks and the world was falling apart, and now we've just moved on as per usual. I've often felt that way about the Asian American identity, about kind of representation. You and I have both been working in the media for so many years, and for so many years people have saying, this is it, this is the revolution, this is the transformative moment. And I look back and they were sort of kind of bubblings under the surface. And it isn't until just recently in the past few years that I feel like, oh no, this is actually the transformation. Like I'm comfortable in saying that there is a shifting that is profound and unlike any other that I've experienced in my time covering the news and covering representation and diverse voices. Like, this feels so different than when I was at MTV. This feels so different than when I was trying to cover all of the AAPI, the small, tiny number of AAPI voices that would come across my news desk. So yeah, I do hope that this is what the future is measured against. And I hope that these conversations are just, the tip of the iceberg, right? In so many ways. Did you have, I know that you wrote the afterword towards this in the book, but did you have like an essay within this book that, I don't want to say favorite, because I think that's really hard to say, but something that really struck you as you were reading this?
Yeah, they're all so different.
Yeah.
And, it was just, but yet so relatable.
Yeah.
I think that was probably one of the things that struck me the most, because I know the effort that we made to make sure to diversify geography and age and education levels and economic background. And so to have this anthology at the end of it where these stories were all so relatable was a little unexpected,
Yeah.
honestly, because like there definitely was that thread. And in writing the afterword, I got to read some of the essays, not all of them, but enough to get a feel for the tenor and tone of the book. And then of course I had reached out to you and asked for your introduction so that we could make it
mirror that. Yeah.
Make it more of like a bookend. And I marvel at the variety. I mean, we have a one-act play, we have some drawings and artistic pieces. And so, gosh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you have one that really resonated? I can't.
Yeah, I mean, they, like you said, they're all different, and they're all different mediums too, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, some are drawings, some are spoken word poems. I loved a lot of them, and one that kind of struck me towards the end of it was by Anish Raman, and he was the speechwriter for Obama. And he kind of wrote this essay, and he broke his essay out into quote unquote drafts, as he would, write any speech. So it's first draft, second draft, third draft. And the first draft is, the first draft of who he defined himself, when he was young. And then the second draft continues on. And he has at the very last of at the end of his essay, he writes, as a community, we undeniably face anti-Asian racism. If we choose to see it, we also face the harsh reality that we are often complicit in systemic racism, especially in anti-Black systemic racism. As we lean into our proximity to whiteness, we only support the idea that at the base of being American is being white. I had spent the better part of my life doing just that, not anymore. And, there's just moments in this book, like in that little passage that I read, where I'm like, this is where we are. Like, this is electric. Like, this is a live wire. Like, rehearsal is over. We are going live. Like, this is it. And it's moments like that where I read it and I'm like, this is the moment that we're in right now. It captures so much of what I feel about the Asian American identity that is so different than what I have felt about myself before. And so, this whole book is that it does feel, at times there are essays that feel very nostalgic, and there is such a heartwarming feeling to it. And then there are moments where we are in the present. We are woken up by this, by these words that just, there's undeniably something there that is sharp, that is clear, and that is a real reckoning for a lot of us, and so I love that. I think that there are just so many moments like that in this anthology, and there are more questions which is good, you know, because I don't know how you've been processing, but I'm a slow turtle processor. You know, I haven't fully processed the past few years, and what has recently, even as we sit here today, the extreme violence that has gone on even this past week. And it sits so heavily in processing it. It just takes up so much time, and it helps. To me, I turn to books. The news, Instagram, all of that stuff really distract me from understanding what I'm feeling. It's only when I'm actually sitting down, pen, paper, words, that I start to form a kind of opinion, or even a snapshot of like what I'm feeling and what this means in the greater sense. And so I think that this book has done that in so many ways. Like, it's articulated things that I have felt, but I couldn't actually, you know, put words to. So
I was just going to say that as well. It just, some of these words articulated what I was feeling, but didn't know how to say myself. And so kind of along the lines of the passage that you read, one of the things that stuck out to me was the essay by Ellen Powell, you know, the former CEO of Reddit. And she was telling the story about when she was at one of these firms, and there was a slew of promotions, but it was only men that got promoted. And like none of the women got promoted, even though they had been there longer and actually had better performance metrics, but still. And then, so she says, it was a wake-up call for me to stop internalizing structural problems as my own failures and to start working on solving them systemically. So, I mean, I was like, wow, that is sort of, I think, where we really are today too, is confronting the structural issues and how do we work together to fight the system.
And to not take that on. I mean, that's such a good point, Michelle. I think that dismantling like our own shame and guilt about the way that things have happened in our lives, trying to figure out, okay, how much of that is personal responsibility and how much of that is completely out of our control. Like, you know, working harder and longer doesn't necessarily mean, you know, we don't live in a you know, meritocracy. Like her whole thesis is like, that's fucking bullshit. It's a myth, and like, I'm done with it. And when you buy into that myth, you buy into the way that things are, to white supremacy, to patriarchy, you know, all of that. And we're conditioned to do that. And it's so hard to separate that, because at the same time, we're always told, like, you know, it's on you, like, you can do it, like, you know, like, come on, girl, you know, girl boss it up. You know, I don't know. I'm just making bumper stickers up, but I feel like incorrectly, but you know what I mean. I also love that, like, you know, when Christian Trimmer and MTV Books came to me with this, you know, I obviously have a very long history with MTV, continue to have you know, a fantastic working relationship with MTV and working on projects with them to this day. And there is something about putting something out for the younger versions of ourselves that we wish that we had. You had touched upon that earlier. There is something about the feeling, like when I was sitting down, I imagined, you know, my 16-year-old self reading this, right? That's who I had as the person that I was writing to. And I think a lot of people, took that to heart. And there is something extremely revolutionary to think about this landing in the hands of, you know, young people now that are just forming the answers to who they are, and what it means to be X, however way that they define themselves, and that this can help shape that, because I think it's just, you know, that's where the transformation is, right? I mean, that's where the real lasting transformation is, not just a flash in the pan or a, you know, in Hollywood, it's great. Like when you get one successful, diverse voice, then it becomes that one for decades. You never see another Joy Luck Club for, X amount of years. And then, and you always have to prove yourself. But there's something about this landing in the hands of a young person who is going to hopefully incorporate it into their DNA that feels very powerful.
Yeah, I agree. And also just a different world. I mean, I look at some of the kids growing up today, and they get to see things like Over the Moon, Turning Red, like and grow up in this world where you and I didn't have that on our screens, or even like the YA stories that are coming out. Like I remember when To All the Boys first premiered, and it was just like, this is so great to have these YA romance stories. And what is that like to grow up in that world, to be that age, and to be able to watch things like that?
Yeah. I mean, it is profound. I think that any person living in the margins of society understands how deeply impactful seeing a version of yourself is, in books and in film and TV. It's only the folks that see that so much of themselves, I hear complaints about, right? And I walk into that often, where, there'll be complaints that, it's only because, they're only looking for diverse voices right now, like I can't get work because of X. And I just think that, that like, we can't put it, they're just like, it's a bottomless pit, like there are just endless amounts of stories that have never seen the light of day. Like, you know what I mean? Like if we did this till the day we died, which is, I think you and I are both so dedicated to this work, to putting diverse voices out there, it would never be enough. I can't ever imagine a world where I'm like, okay, enough API, stories. I've seen it all. There's nothing more to tell. And so I just love that we're putting this out there, right? We're putting this alongside all of the great films that have come out in the past few years, alongside, Bling Empire, love it or hate it. I sat through that show in one sitting and gobbled it up. I was like, I have to stop watching this. This is not good for my mental health. I should not be caring about these people. And yet, right, sucks to it. But, alongside that, right, like all of it, I want all the sugar and the carbs, and I want all the the protein. Like I want the full meal of what the experience is.
Oh, absolutely. And then also with Bling Empire, I likewise did it all in one seating. But what I really loved about it too, though, is that there was nutrients wrapped up in the sugar, right? Because they address a lot of topics that we don't normally even get to see, like addiction and intergenerational trauma. And I know I really loved how they weave that in. And so to see stories like that on screen, as well as in books like this one, I think just highlight even further just the variety within, and that we're not a monolith. Like we always say that, but then we have a book like this where there's so many, like 30 different contributors. Like that was one of the exciting things too, because last year Cape celebrated our 30th anniversary, and so we said, hey, do you think we could get 30 contributors? And we were able to pack it all into a book that is not 1,000 pages. Even though we have so many more voices we would have loved to include, maybe they'll give us a sequel.
I mean, I'm planning on a sequel every year. I don't know. I mean, I'm not writing an intro every year, but I'm planning on pushing them for a sequel every year. And it's not that heavy of a book, and there's pictures, guys, so don't be intimidated. It breaks it up. There's poetry. Like there's so much in this dialogue, and I think people are going to be really surprised when they pick this up. I don't know. I was surprised. I think I think you have assumptions, when you put a title out, Growing Up Asian in America. I think it's,
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, when I first saw that title, I was like, is that, I mean, that feels kind of generic, like should we be coming up with something sexier, and now I'm sitting with it. I'm like, no, like the genius of it is that it's just, there's no like bells and whistles on it. Like, this is exactly what we're talking about. What is the experience of growing up Asian in America? And then when you open it, you have such a vast, different group of people with crazy different experiences from, like you said, all walks of life, ages, careers, geographical regions in this country. And this tapestry of voices is like, one is more surprising and delightful than the next. And I say that not because, we're part of it, but I truly believe it. I don't think I would be promoting this book, as I'm just honest with you, as passionately and as much as I've been able to, if I didn't love it so much. I think I would have just, done the like pub day and I'm out. But, you and I are making the rounds because I'm just so proud of the final product and the collection of voices here.
Yeah, same here. And each of the pieces, they're maybe 5 pages, 7 pages max. So they're very bite-sized. You can just sit down, read a story a night. And I think it's not one of these like super heavy books. Like sometimes people might be concerned about that. But I mean, it is very heavy topics, but delivered in digestible pieces or chunks,
Yeah.
So I think that's another really positive strength. And I love that you talked about the title. So to pull the curtain back a little bit,
tell me about that.
We went through like several different like titles, like throwing it around. And one of the things is, well, we didn't want it to sound like a textbook, and like, we also wanted to make it seem a little more user friendly. And so, yeah, I'm really happy with the title that MTV ended up going with.
There's, and I know that we're going to sit with him maybe tomorrow, I think it is, but there's this story in here by Nathan Ramos Park, and it's called Going Country. And it's about, basically, if you can imagine it, he tells a story of growing up both Korean and Filipino, I think, right? And somewhere in a small town in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And he's gay. And his dream is to become a country singer. Like, just the premise of that, I'm like, where is the TV show? I'm watching the entire series. And he talks about just like, right? This like dream he had. Like, can you imagine like being who he was and growing up in that time and growing up in that place of being like, I want to be a country singer. Like, what is more American, right? Than Faith Hill, like, being a country singer. And it's so wonderful to even imagine like how that shapes who you are. But he writes in there about like how growing up, even his teachers, in first grade were sort of very discouraging, right, of who he was and that sort of thing. And I think about like not only the audience that this book is catered towards, right, the young audience, but like hopefully all of the other folks that are going to read it, the educators, the ones that are influential in young people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
How we inadvertently and unconsciously bring our own biases to the table, and how that can crush a young country singer's dreams. I want to go back to his teacher and be like, read this.
Yeah, and watch his YouTube video. He has a music video for his gay country Asian love song.
That's right. You guys, it's so good.
It's really amazing. Yeah.
Incredible. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Thanks so much for taking the time, Michelle and Suchin. Today's guests were Michelle Sugihara and Suchin Pak, and they were discussing My Life Growing Up Asian in America. You can order the book at skylitbooks.com or swing by and pick it up at the store. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to my guests.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitebooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.